1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. Book 1, Chapter 6. Tengo. Does this mean we're going pretty far from the city? The next call from Komatsu came early Friday morning, shortly after 5 o'clock. Tengo was just then dreaming about crossing a long stone bridge on a river. He was going to retrieve a document that he had forgotten on the opposite shore. He was alone. The river was big and beautiful, with sandbars here and there. The river flowed gently, and willows grew on the sandbars. He could see the elegant shape of trout in the water. The willow's brilliant green leaves hung down, gently touching the water's surface. The scene could have come from a Chinese plate. Tengo woke and looked at the clock by his pillow in the dark. Of course, he knew before lifting the receiver who would be calling at such a time.
"Do you have a word processor, Tengo?" Komatsu asked.
"No, good morning. No, were you up?" If he was awake now, Komatsu must have pulled an all-nighter. He had certainly not awakened early to see the sun rise. He must have recalled something he wanted to tell Tengo before going to bed. "No, of course not," Tengo answered. He was still in pitch darkness, halfway across the long bridge. He rarely had such vivid dreams. "It's nothing to boast about, but I can't afford anything like that."
"Do you know how to use one?"
"I do. I can pretty much handle either a dedicated word processor or a computer. We have them at school. I use them all the time for work."
"Good. I want you to buy one today. I don't know a thing about machines, so I'll leave it to you to pick out the make and model. Send me the bill afterward. I want you to start revising Air Crystallis as soon as possible."
"You know, we're talking about at least 250,000 yen. For a cheap one."
"That's no problem."
Tengo cocked his head in wonderment. "So, you're saying you're going to buy me a word processor?"
"That I am. From my own little private stash. This job deserves at least that much of an investment. We'll never get anything done playing it cheap. As you know, Air Crystallis arrived as a word-processed manuscript, which means we'll have to use a word processor to rewrite it. I want you to make the new one look like the old one. Can you start the rewrite today?"
Tengo thought about it a moment. "I can start it any time I decide to, but Fukaeri wants me to meet someone this Sunday before she gives me permission, and of course, I haven't met the person yet. If those negotiations break down, anything we do now could be a complete waste of time and money."
"Never mind, it'll work out. Don't worry about the details. Start working right away. We're in a race against time."
"Are you that sure my interview will go well?"
"That's what my gut tells me," Komatsu said. "I go by the gut. I might not appear to have any talent, but I've got plenty of gut instinct, if I do say so myself. That's how I've survived all these years. By the way, Tengo, do you know what the biggest difference is between talent and gut instinct?"
"I have no idea."
"You can have tons of talent, but it won't necessarily keep you fed. If you have sharp instincts, though, you'll never go hungry."
"I'll keep that in mind," Tengo said.
"All I'm saying is, don't worry. You can start the job today."
"If you say so, it's fine with me. I was just trying to avoid kicking myself for starting too early."
"Let me worry about that. I'll take complete responsibility."
"Okay then. I'm seeing somebody this afternoon, but I'll be free to start working after that.
I can shop for a word processor this morning. That's great, Tengo. I'm counting on you. We'll join forces and turn the world upside down.
Tengo's married girlfriend called just after 9, when she was finished dropping her husband and kids off at the train station for the daily commute. She was supposed to be visiting Tengo's apartment that afternoon. They always got together on Fridays. "I'm just not feeling right," she said. "Sorry, but I don't think I can make it today. See you next week." Not feeling right was her euphemism for her period. She had been raised to prefer delicate, euphemistic expressions. There was nothing delicate or euphemistic about her in bed, but that was another matter. Tengo said he was also sorry to miss her that day, but he supposed it couldn't be helped. In fact, he was not all that sorry to miss her on this particular Friday. He always enjoyed sex with her, but his feelings were already moving in the direction of rewriting Aer Crystalis. Ideas were welling up inside him like life forms stirring in a primordial sea. This way, I'm no different from Komatsu, he thought. Nothing has formally settled, and already my feelings are headed in that direction on their own. At 10 o'clock, he went to Shinjuku and bought a Fujitsu word processor with his credit card. It was the latest model, far lighter than earlier versions. He also bought ink ribbon cartridges and paper. He carried everything back to his apartment, set the machine on his desk, and plugged it in. At work, he used a full-sized Fujitsu word processor, and the basic functions of this portable model were not much different. To reassure himself of its operation, he launched into the rewriting of Aer Crystalis. He had no well-defined plan for rewriting the novella, no consistent method or guidelines that he had prepared, just a few detailed ideas for certain sections. Tengo was not even sure if it was possible to do a logical rewrite of a work of fantasy and feeling. True, as Komatsu had said, the style needed a great deal of improvement, but would it be possible for him to do that without destroying the work's fundamental nature and atmosphere? Wouldn't this be tantamount to giving a butterfly a skeleton? Such thoughts only caused him confusion and anxiety. But events had already started moving, and he had a limited amount of time. He couldn't just sit there, thinking, arms folded. All he could do was deal with one small, concrete problem after another. Perhaps, as he worked on each detail by hand, an overall image would take shape spontaneously. "You know you can do it, Tengo," Komatsu had declared with confidence, and for some unfathomable reason, Tengo himself was able to swallow Komatsu's words whole, for now. In both word and action, Komatsu could be a questionable character, and he basically thought of no one but himself. If the occasion arose, he would drop Tengo without batting an eyelash, but as Komatsu himself liked to say, he had special instincts as an editor. He made all judgments instantaneously and carried them out decisively, unconcerned what other people might say. This was a quality indispensable to a brilliant commanding officer on the front lines, but it was a quality that Tengo himself did not possess. It was 12:30 by the time Tengo started rewriting Aer Crystalis. He typed the first few pages of the manuscript into the word processor as is, stopping at a convenient break in the story. He would rewrite this block of text first, changing none of the content but thoroughly reworking the style. It was like remodeling a condo. You leave the basic structure intact, keep the kitchen and bathroom in place, but tear out and replace the flooring, ceiling, walls, and partitions. I'm a skilled carpenter who's been put in charge of everything, Tengo told himself. I don't have a blueprint, so all I can do is use my intuition and experience to work on each separate problem that comes up. After typing it in, he reread Fukaeri's text, adding explanatory material to sections that felt too obscure, improving the flow of the language and deleting superfluous or redundant passages. Here and there, he would change the order of sentences or paragraphs. Fukaeri was extremely sparing in her use of adjectives and adverbs, and he wanted to remain consistent with that aspect of her style. But in certain places where he felt more descriptions were necessary, he would supply something appropriate. Her style overall was juvenile and artless, but the good and the bad passages stood out from each other so clearly that choosing among them took far less time and trouble than he had expected. The artlessness had some passages dense and difficult, but it gave others a startling freshness. He needed only to throw out and replace the first type, and leave the second in place. Rewriting her work gave Tengo a renewed sense that Fukaeri had written the piece without any intention of leaving behind a work of literature. All she had done was record a story, or, as she had put it, things she had actually witnessed, that she possessed inside her, and it just so happened that she had used words to do it. She might just as well have used something other than words, but she had not come across a more appropriate medium. It was as simple as that. She had never had any literary ambition, no thought of making the finished piece into a commodity, so she felt no need to pay attention to the details of style, as if she had been making a room for herself and all she needed was walls and a roof to keep the weather out. This was why it made no difference to her how much Tengo reworked her writing. She had already accomplished her objective. When she said, "Fix it any way you like," she was almost certainly expressing her true feelings. And yet, the sentences and paragraphs that comprised Air Crystallis were by no means the work of an author writing just for herself. If Fukaeri's sole objective was to record things she had witnessed or imagined, setting them down as sheer information, she could have accomplished that much with a list. She didn't have to go to the trouble of fashioning a story, which was unmistakably writing that was meant for other people to pick up and read, which was precisely why Air Crystallis, though written without the objective of creating a literary work, and in crude, artless language, still had succeeded in acquiring the power to appeal directly to the heart. The more he read, however, the more convinced Tengo became that those other people were almost certainly not the same general public that modern literature invariably had in mind. All right then, what kind of reader was this meant for? Tengo had no idea. All he knew for sure was that Air Crystallis was an utterly unique work of fiction, combining enormous strengths with enormous flaws, and that it seemed to possess an objective that was something quite special. Tengo found that his rewrite was more than doubling the length of the text. The original was far more often underwritten than overwritten, so rewriting it for coherence and consistency could not help but increase its volume. Fukaeri's text was so threadbare. True, with its more logical style and consistent point of view, the new version was far easier to read, but the overall flow was becoming strangely sluggish. Its logicality showed through too clearly, dulling the sharpness of the original. Once he had filled out this first block of text, Tango's next task was to eliminate from this bloated manuscript everything that was not strictly necessary, to remove every extra bit of fat. Subtraction was a far simpler process than addition, and it reduced the volume of his text by some 30%. It was a kind of mind game. He would set a certain time period for expanding the text as much as possible, then set a certain time period for reducing the text as much as possible. As he alternated tenaciously between the two processes, the swings between them gradually shrank in size, until the volume of text naturally settled down where it belonged, arriving at a point where it could be neither expanded nor reduced. He excised any hint of ego, shook off all extraneous embellishments, and sent all transparent signs of imposed logic into the back room. Tango had a gift for such work. He was a born technician, processing both the intense concentration of a bird sailing through the air in search of prey, and the patience of a donkey hauling water, playing always by the rules of the game. Tango had been all but lost in the work for some time, when he looked up to find it was nearly 3 o'clock. Come to think of it, he hadn't eaten lunch yet. He went to the kitchen, put a kettle on to boil, and ground some coffee beans. He ate a few crackers with cheese, followed those with an apple, and when the water boiled, made coffee. Drinking this from a large mug, he distracted himself with thoughts of sex with his older girlfriend. Ordinarily, he would have been doing it with her right about now. He pictured the things that he would be doing, and the things that she would be doing. He closed his eyes, turned his face toward the ceiling, and released a deep sigh, heavy with suggestion and possibility. Tango then went back to his desk, switched circuits in his brain again, and read through his rewritten opening to Air Crystallis on the word processor's screen, the way the general in the opening scene of Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory makes his rounds inspecting the trenches. He approved of what he found, not bad. The writing was much improved. He was making headway, but not enough. He still had lots to do. The trench walls were crumbling here and there. The machine gun's ammunition was running out. The barbed wire barriers had noticeable thin spots. He printed a draft, saved the document, turned off the word processor, and shifted the machine to the side of his desk. Now, with pencil in hand, he did another careful read-through of the text, this time on paper. Again, he deleted parts that seemed superfluous, fleshed out passages that felt underwritten, and revised sections until they fit more smoothly into the rest of the story. He selected his words with all the care of a craftsman, choosing the perfect piece of tile to fill a narrow gap in a bathroom floor, inspecting the fit from every angle. Where the fit was less than perfect, he adjusted the shape. The slightest difference in nuance could bring the passage to life or kill it. The exact same text was subtly different to read when viewed on the printed pages rather than on the word processor screen. The feel of words he chose would change depending on whether he was writing them on paper in pencil or typing them on the keyboard. It was imperative to do both. He turned the machine on again and typed each penciled correction back into the word process document. Then he reread the revised text on the screen. Not bad, he told himself. Each sentence possessed the proper weight, which gave the whole thing a natural rhythm. Tengo sat up straight in his chair, stretched his back, and, turning his face to the ceiling, let out a long breath. His job was by no means done. When he reread the text in a few days, he would find more things that needed fixing. But this was fine for now. His powers of concentration had just about reached their limit. He needed a cooling-off period. The hands of the clock were nearing 5, and the light of the day was growing dim. He would rewrite the next block tomorrow. It had taken him almost the whole day to rewrite just the first few pages. This was a lot more time-consuming than he had expected it to be, but the process should speed up once the rules were laid down and a rhythm took hold. Besides, the most difficult and time-consuming part would be the opening. Once he got through that, the rest. Tengo pictured Fukaeri and wondered how she would feel when she read the rewritten manuscript. But then he realized that he had no idea how Fukaeri would feel about anything. He knew virtually nothing about her other than that she was 17, a junior in high school with no interest in taking college entrance exams, spoke in a very odd way, liked white wine, and had a disturbingly beautiful face. Still, Tengo had begun to have a fairly strong sense that his grasp of the world that Fukaeri was trying to depict or record in Air Crystallis was generally accurate. The scenes that Fukaeri had created with her peculiar limited vocabulary took on a new clarity and vividness when reworked by Tengo, who paid such careful attention to detail. They flowed now, he could see that. All that he had provided the work was a level of technical reinforcement, but the results were utterly natural, as if he himself had written the thing from scratch. Now, the story of Air Crystallis was beginning to emerge with tremendous power. This was a great source of happiness for Tengo. The long hours of mental concentration had left him physically spent, but emotionally uplifted. For some time after he had turned off the word processor and left his desk, Tengo could not suppress the desire to keep rewriting the story. He was enjoying the work immensely. At this rate, he might manage not to disappoint Fukaeri, though in fact he could not picture Fukaeri being either disappointed or pleased. Far from it, he could not even picture her cracking a smile or displaying the slightest hint of displeasure. Her face was devoid of expression. Tengo could not tell whether she lacked expression because she had no feelings or the feelings she had were unconnected to her expression. In any case, she was a mysterious girl. The heroine of Air Crystallis was probably Fukaeri herself in the past. A 10-year-old girl, she lived in a special mountain commune or commune-like place where she was assigned to look after a blind goat. All the children in the commune had work assignments. Though the goat was old, it had special meaning for the community, so the girl's duty was to make sure that no harm came to it. She was not allowed to take her eyes off it for a second. One day, however, in a moment of carelessness, she did exactly that, and the goat died. As her punishment, the girl was put in total isolation for 10 days, locked in an old storehouse with the goat's corpse. The goat served as a passageway to this world for the little people. The girl did not know whether the little people were good or bad, and neither did Tengo. When night came, The little people would enter this world through the corpse, and they would go back to the other side when dawn broke. The girl could speak to them. They taught her how to make an air chrysalis. What most impressed Tengo was the concrete detail with which the blind goat's traits and actions were depicted. These details were what made the work as a whole so vivid. Could Fukaeri have actually been the keeper of a blind goat? And could she have actually lived in a mountain commune like the one in the story? Tengo guessed that the answer in both cases was yes, because if she had never had these experiences, Fukaeri was a storyteller of rare, inborn talent. Tengo decided that he would ask Fukaeri about the goat and the commune the next time they met, which was to be on Sunday. Of course, she might not answer his questions. Judging from their previous conversation, it seemed that Fukaeri would only answer questions when she felt like it. When she didn't want to answer, or when she clearly had no intentions of responding, she simply ignored the questions as if she had never heard them. Like Komatsu, the two were much alike in that regard, which made them very different from Tengo. If someone asked Tengo a question, any question, he would do his best to answer it. He had probably been born that way. His older girlfriend called him at 5:30. "What did you do today?" she asked. "I was writing a story all day," he answered, half truthfully. He had not been writing his own fiction, but this was not something he could explain to her in any detail. "Did it go well?" "More or less." "I'm sorry for cancelling today on such a short notice. I think we can meet next week." "I'll be looking forward to it." "Me too," she said. After that, she talked about her children. She often did that with Tengo. She had 2 little girls. Tengo had no siblings and obviously no children, so he didn't know much about young children. But that never stopped her from telling Tengo about hers. Tengo rarely initiated a conversation, but he enjoyed listening to other people, and so he listened to her with interest. Her older girl, a 2nd grader, was probably being bullied at school, she said. The girl herself had told her nothing, but the mother of one of the girl's classmates had let her know that this was apparently happening. Tengo had never met the girl, but he had once seen a photograph. She didn't look much like her mother. "Why are they bullying her?" Tengo asked. "She often has asthma attacks, so she can't participate in a lot of activities with the other kids. Maybe that's it. She's a sweet little thing, and her grades aren't bad." "I don't get it," Tengo said. "You'd think they'd take special care of a kid with asthma, not bully her." "It's never that simple in the kids' world," she said with a sigh. "Kids get shut out just for being different from everyone else. The same kind of thing goes on in the grown-up world, but it's much more direct in the children's world." "Can you give me a concrete example?" She gave him several examples, none of which were especially bad in itself, but which, continued on a daily basis, could have a severe impact on a child. Hiding things, not speaking to the children, or doing nasty imitations of her. "Did you ever experience bullying when you were a child?" Tengo thought back to his childhood. "I don't think so," he answered. "Or maybe I just never noticed." "If you never noticed, it never happened. I mean, the whole point of bullying is to make the other person notice it's being done to him or her. You can't have bullying without the victim noticing." Even as a child, Tengo had been big and strong, and people treated him with respect, which was probably why he was never bullied. But he had far more serious problems than mere bullying to deal with back then. Were you ever bullied? Tengo asked. Never, she declared, but then she seemed to hesitate. I did do some bullying, though. You were part of a group that did it? Yes, in the 5th grade. We got together and decided not to talk to one boy. I can't remember why. There must have been a reason, but it probably wasn't a very good one if I can't remember what it was. I still feel bad about it, though. I'm ashamed to think about it. I wonder why I went and did something like that. I have no idea what made me do it. This reminded Tengo of a certain event, something from the distant past that he would recall now and then. Something he could never forget. But he decided not to mention it. It would have been a long story, and it was the kind of thing that loses the most important nuances when reduced to words. He had never told anyone about it, and he probably never would. Finally, his girlfriend said, everybody feels safe belonging not to the excluded minority, but to the excluded majority. You think, oh, I'm glad that's not me. It's basically the same in all periods in all societies. If you belong to the majority, you can avoid thinking about lots of troubling things. And those troubling things are all that you can think about when you're one of the few. That's about the size of it, she said mournfully. But maybe, if you're in a situation like that, you learn to think for yourself. Yes, but maybe what you end up thinking for yourself about is all those troubling things. That's another problem, I suppose. Better not to think about it too seriously, Tengo said. I doubt it'll turn out to be that terrible. I'm sure there must be a few kids in our class who know how to use their brains. I guess so, she said, and then she spent some time alone with her thoughts. Holding the receiver against his ear, Tengo waited patiently for her to gather her thoughts together. Thanks, she said finally. I feel a little better after talking to you. She seemed to have found some answers. I feel a little better too, Tengo said. Why's that? Talking to you. See you next Friday, she said. After hanging up, Tengo went out to the neighborhood supermarket. Returning home with a big bag of groceries, he wrapped the vegetables and fish in plastic and put them in the refrigerator. He was preparing dinner to the refrains of an FM music broadcast when the phone rang. 4 phone calls in one day was a lot for Tengo. He could probably count the number of days that such a thing happened in any one year. This time, it was Fukaeri. About Sunday, she said without saying hello. He could hear car horns honking at the other end. A lot of drivers seemed to be angry about something. She was probably calling from a public phone on a busy street. Yes, he said, adding meat to the bones of her bare pronouncement. Sunday morning, the day after tomorrow, I'll be seeing you and meeting somebody else. 9 o'clock. Shinjuku Station. Front end of the train to Tachikawa, she said, setting forth 3 facts in a row. In other words, you want to meet on the outward bound platform of the Chuo line, where the first car stops, right? Right. Where should I buy a ticket to? Anywhere. So, I should just buy any ticket and adjust the fare where we get off, he said, supplementing material to her words the way he was doing with Air Crystalis. Does this mean we're going pretty far from the city? What were you just doing? She asked, ignoring his question. Making dinner. Making what? Nothing special, just cooking for myself. Grilling a dried mackerel and grating a daikon radish. Making a miso soup with little necks and green onions to eat with tofu, dousing cucumber slices and wakame seaweed with vinegar, ending up with rice and napa pickles. That's all. Sounds good. I wonder. Nothing special. Pretty much what I eat all the time, Tengo said. Fukaeri kept silent. Long silences did not seem to bother her, but this was not the case for Tengo. Oh, yes, he said. I should tell you I started rewriting your Air Crystallis today. I know you haven't given us your final permission, but there's so little time. I'd better get started if we're going to meet the deadline. Mr. Komatsu said so, she asked, without a question mark. Yes, he's the one who told me to get started. Are you and Mr. Komatsu close? She asked. Well, sort of, Tengo answered. No one in this world could actually be close to Komatsu, Tengo guessed. But trying to explain this to Fukaeri would take too long. Is the rewrite going well? So far, so good. That's nice, Fukaeri said. She seemed to mean it. It sounded to Tengo as if Fukaeri was happy in her own way to hear that the rewriting of her work was going well. But given her limited expression of emotion, she could not go so far as to openly suggest this. I hope you'll like what I'm doing, he said. Not worried. Why not? Tengo asked. Fukaeri did not answer, lapsing into silence in her end. It seemed like a deliberate kind of silence, designed to make Tengo think, but try as he might, Tengo could come up with no explanation for why she should have such confidence in him. He spoke to break the silence. You know, there's something I'd like to ask you. Did you actually live in a commune-type place and take care of a goat? The descriptions are so realistic. I wanted to ask you if these things actually happened. Fukaeri cleared her throat. I don't talk about the goat. That's fine, Tengo said. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I just thought I'd try asking. Don't worry. For the author, the work is everything. No explanations needed. Let's meet on Sunday. Is there anything I should be concerned about in meeting that person? What do you mean? Well, like I should dress properly or bring a gift or something. You haven't given me any hint what the person is like. Fukaeri felt silent again, but this time it did not seem deliberate. She simply could not fathom the purpose of his question or what prompted him to ask it. His question hadn't landed in any region of her consciousness. It seemed to have gone beyond the bounds of meaning, sucked into permanent nothingness, like a lone planetary exploration rocket that had sailed beyond Pluto. Never mind, he said, giving up. It's not important. It had been a mistake even to ask Fukaeri such a question. He supposed he could pick up a basket of fruit or something along the way. Okay then, see you at 9 o'clock Sunday morning, Tengo said. Fukaeri hesitated a few moments and then hung up without saying anything. No goodbye, no see you Sunday, no anything. There was just the click of the connection being cut. Perhaps she had nodded to Tengo before hanging up the receiver. Unfortunately, though, body language generally fails to have its intended effect on the phone. Tengo set down the receiver, took 2 deep breaths, switched the circuits of his brain to something more realistic, and continued with the preparations for his modest dinner.